this creature that is easily and quickly traversing in around 90 inches of snow.
On January 11, 2025, 7 law enforcement officers from the Skamania County Sheriff's Department entered the remote wilderness of Gifford-Pinchot National Forest on what appeared to be a routine wildlife investigation. At 2:15 p.m. on that overcast winter afternoon, Sergeant Mike Torres led his tactical response team into the forest's depths. The unit consisted of seasoned deputies Jackson, Williams, Lee, Rodriguez, and Murphy, alongside rookie officer Sarah Blake. Their mission seemed straightforward: investigate a series of aggressive wildlife attacks that had terrorized campers over the previous month. 3 separate incidents had been reported, each involving what witnesses described as unusually aggressive primate behavior during nighttime hours. The attacks had escalated in violence, with the most recent leaving 2 campers hospitalized and 1 missing entirely. At first, local wildlife officials theorized the behavior could be linked to displaced black bears or escaped macaques from a private collection, species known for defensive aggression and territorial displays when threatened or competing for scarce winter food source. The team arrived equipped with standard tactical gear, body cameras, and radio communication systems. Their vehicles navigated the treacherous logging roads that snaked through the snow-covered terrain, reaching the reported attack site as the first flakes of an early winter storm began to fall. What the officers discovered at the campsite defied conventional explanation. A recreational vehicle lay overturned, its metal frame twisted and punctured by what appeared to be massive claws or hands. Personal belongings were scattered across a wide radius, suggesting a struggle of extraordinary violence. Most disturbing were the tracks preserved in the fresh snow. The footprints measured over 18 inches in length, clearly bipedal, with a stride length that suggested a creature of immense size and strength. Sergeant Torres, a 20-year veteran with extensive experience in wildlife encounters, immediately recognized that these prints matched no known animal he knew. Body camera footage from this initial phase shows the officers methodically documenting the scene, their professional demeanor gradually giving way to unease as the implications of their findings became clear. Radio communications with dispatch revealed Torres's growing concern as he reported the unusual evidence, requesting additional resources and wildlife experts. The surviving camper, still hospitalized from his injuries, had provided a chilling account of the attack. He described being awakened by his companion's screams, then witnessing a massive, hair-covered figure dragging the victim into the darkness. The creature's intelligence was what haunted him most: the deliberate, almost human-like way it had disabled their vehicle and eliminated escape routes before attacking. At 3:45 p.m., the investigation took a sudden turn. Deputy Lee's body camera recorded a disturbance in the tree line, roughly 200 yards out, branches shifting, brush parting, and a large, indistinct mass moving low and fast between the trees. The form never fully emerged, but the motion carried a weight and deliberation that none of them could explain. Audio recordings from this period reveal low, resonant calls echoing through the forest, vocalizations unlike any known wildlife in the region. The officers reported an oppressive silence that had fallen over the area, with normal forest sounds completely absent. Even experienced outdoorsmen among the team noted this as highly unusual behavior for the local ecosystem. Torres made the tactical decision to regroup his team, recognizing they were potentially dealing with an unknown and dangerous threat. However, their radio communications had become increasingly unreliable, with GPS units malfunctioning and electronic equipment experiencing unexplained interference. Officer Blake's camera captured the first clear sighting at 4:10 p.m. The footage shows a massive figure, estimated at 8 to 9 feet in height, standing motionless on a distant ridgeline. The creature appeared to be covered in dark, matted hair. Most unsettling was its apparent lack of fear. This was not the behavior of a wild animal encountering humans. When Deputy Murphy attempted to approach for closer documentation, the situation escalated rapidly. What they had assumed was a single creature was revealed to be a coordinated group of 4 to 5 massive beings. Body camera footage from multiple angles captures the moment when the officers realized they were completely surrounded. The creatures displayed an unsettling level of coordination that caught the officers off guard. Their movements appeared deliberate, blocking paths back toward the vehicles and forcing the team uphill into rougher terrain. It wasn't random aggression. It felt organized, as if the animals were responding to each other's cues. Standard law enforcement firearms proved largely ineffective against the attackers as they opened fire. Officers reported through radio that even direct hits seemed to have minimal impact, with the creatures showing remarkable resilience to conventional weapons. Radio communications became completely unreliable at this critical moment, with desperate calls for backup met only with static. The officers found themselves isolated in hostile territory, facing an enemy unlike anything in their training or experience. Deputies Jackson and Williams were the first casualties, their body cameras going dark after capturing terrifying footage of the coordinated attack. Sergeant Torres attempted to maintain unit cohesion and coordinate a defensive response, evident from the recording, but the creature's systematic approach quickly overwhelmed standard law enforcement tactics. Piecing together the evidence, what followed was not a chaotic animal attack, but a methodical elimination of the entire unit. The creatures demonstrated learned behavior, suggesting previous encounters with armed humans. Officer Blake's body camera captured the most complete record of the encounter. Her footage shows the rookie's terror as she witnessed her colleagues being systematically overwhelmed by these beings. Sergeant Torres's final transmission, captured at 4:35 p.m., was a desperate Mayday call requesting immediate evacuation and military support. His camera went dark moments later, leaving only the audio of his final moments. 3 officers initially survived the initial assault, Deputies Lee and Rodriguez, along with Officer Blake. Their body cameras document a harrowing retreat through increasingly treacherous terrain as winter conditions worked against them while seemingly favoring their pursuers. Every attempt to reach the patrol vehicles was thwarted, with the officers eventually discovering their transportation had been deliberately disabled or destroyed. Officer Blake, despite her terror, continued documenting the encounter, recognizing the importance of preserving evidence of what was happening to her unit. As darkness approached at 5:45 p.m., the surviving officers were driven to a rocky outcropping. Deputy Lee's final coherent radio transmission reported their position and requested immediate military intervention. Officer Blake's final body camera footage shows her attempting to hide memory cards from the various recording devices, recognizing that preserving evidence might be more important than her own survival. When backup units finally reached the scene that evening, they found only destroyed equipment and the carefully hidden memory cards that Officer Blake had managed to conceal. The massive search operation that followed involved federal agencies and military resources, but no trace of the missing officers was ever recovered. The official investigation concluded that the 7 officers had been killed by an unknown predator, with their bodies likely consumed or carried away by scavengers. However, the body camera footage tells a different story, one that challenges our understanding of what inhabits the remote wilderness areas of the Pacific Northwest. The Gifford Pinchot incident represents more than just a tragic loss of life. It provides documented evidence of intelligent, coordinated beings operating in our national forests with capabilities that far exceed anything in the known animal kingdom. The question that haunts investigators is not whether these creatures exist, but how long they have been systematically eliminating those who venture too deep into their territory. The 7 officers who entered Gifford Pinchot National Forest that January day were experienced professionals equipped with modern technology and weapons. Their fate serves as a sobering reminder that there are still mysteries in our world that conventional law enforcement is not equipped to handle. What vanished in the forests of Washington under military silence would reappear half a world away in Nepal, where another lens caught movement in the snow and captured something watching from the storm. In the thin air above Tengboche Monastery, where oxygen levels dropped to half that of sea level, experienced Sherpa guide Pemba navigated terrain on March 15, 2018, that would challenge even the most seasoned mountaineers. At 17,800 feet elevation, he was entering a realm where few humans venture, carrying critical supplies to a stranded research station as storm clouds gathered ominously from the Tibetan plateau. Pemba Sherpa, 38 years old and born in the shadow of Everest, possessed the kind of high-altitude expertise that comes only from generations of mountain living. His family had guided expeditions through these peaks for over a century, accumulating knowledge that no textbook could provide. On this particular morning, he carried more than just medical supplies and equipment. He bore the weight of traditional wisdom passed down through countless generations of his people. The supply run to the research station was urgent. Foreign scientists studying high-altitude physiology had been cut off by avalanche activity on the main trail, their radio communications increasingly desperate as medical emergencies developed among their team. Pemba had volunteered for the dangerous solo mission, choosing an unmarked route known only to local Sherpas to avoid the unstable snow conditions that had claimed several lives that season. His equipment was minimal by Western standards: traditional climbing gear, a heavy supply pack, and an older model smartphone that he carried primarily for emergency contact. Unlike the foreign climbers who relied heavily on GPS and satellite communication, Pemba navigated using landmarks invisible to outsiders, reading weather patterns through cloud formations and wind behavior that his grandfather had taught him decades earlier. The morning began with the crystalline clarity that only exists at extreme altitude, but Pemba's experienced eye detected subtle signs of approaching weather. Cloud formations building over Tibet, shifts in wind patterns, and the behavior of high-altitude birds all indicated that his weather window was narrowing faster than predicted. He increased his pace, knowing that being caught in a Himalayan storm at this elevation could prove fatal. At a small stone shrine marking the boundary between safe and sacred territory, Pemba paused for the traditional prayer his people had performed for centuries. This wasn't mere superstition, but acknowledgement that he was entering terrain where different rules applied. The mountain spirits, according to Sherpa belief, protected certain areas and demanded respect from those who passed through their domain. 2 hours into his climb, Pemba discovered tracks that made his blood freeze despite the sub-zero temperature. Pressed deep into wind-crusted snow were footprints unlike anything in his extensive mountain experience. Each print measured over 24 inches in length, clearly bipedal, with a stride that suggested a creature of enormous size and strength, moving with surprising grace across terrain that challenged even experienced climbers. Pemba's lifetime of high-altitude experience allowed him to read these tracks like a book. The depth of impression indicated massive weight, while the spacing and gait suggested intelligence and purpose rather than random animal movement. Most disturbing was their direction. The tracks paralleled his route toward the research station, as if whatever made them was following the same path. With hands shaking from both cold and recognition, Pemba used his phone to document the discovery. The device's battery drained rapidly in the extreme conditions, forcing him to conserve power for genuine emergencies. But these tracks represented something that transcended personal safety. They were evidence of what his people had known for generations, but the outside world dismissed as folklore. Traditional Sherpa knowledge immediately identified these prints as matching elder descriptions of Yeti encounters. This wasn't the first time such evidence had been found, but it was the first time someone with both cultural understanding and modern documentation tools had encountered it. Pemba realized he might be walking into territory that his ancestors had warned about for centuries. As he continued climbing, Pemba began noticing other signs that his traditional training had taught him to recognize. Ice formations were broken in patterns that suggested something large and dominant controlled this area. Deep calls began echoing off the surrounding peaks, vocalizations unlike anything in Pemba's extensive knowledge of Himalayan wildlife. The sounds carried a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the mountain itself, suggesting vocal cords of enormous size and power. Using his phone's limited recording capability, he captured brief audio samples, though the device's microphone struggled with both the extreme cold and the acoustic properties of the thin air. Weather conditions were deteriorating faster than his traditional forecasting had predicted. Visibility dropped to 20 feet as blowing snow created whiteout conditions that would have been fatal for less experienced climbers. But Pemba possessed navigation skills developed over decades of high-altitude guiding, using landmarks and terrain features that remained invisible to outsiders, even in clear conditions. Despite growing fear, his sense of duty to the stranded researchers drove him forward. People were depending on the medical supplies he carried, and abandoning the mission would violate both his professional ethics and cultural values about helping those in need. The approaching storm meant this might be the last opportunity to reach the station